Yeah, my name's Joel Penson. I'm a project officer with Aboriginal Workforce Unit. I grew up on Dungutty land, which is on the mid-north coast of New South Wales. And I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land where I'm giving today's presentation, the Gamaragal people, the elders past and present. I thought I'd take the opportunity to provide some background to my career, even if only for Alira's benefit, who I'm working with closely now, just so that she can see kind of where I've come from. I think when you start working with a new colleague, it tends to be ad hoc, like when you share insights about what background you've got or what insights you've had from different work that you've been involved in. So I actually thought it'd be a good opportunity for me to reflect as well. And when I looked at my career, like listening to other people's approach, I think what was central to my approach to learning and getting skills is probably a strong sense of curiosity. I've always been really interested in how things work. And I've really drawn on that in my working career. So when I was growing up, my parents separated when I was quite young, and I bounced out of home pretty quick actually, and I ended up living in a caravan park when I was in high school on my own, and I really had to become quite self-reliant. And I see it a bit in people that grow up in the bush. It's you often have to figure out things for yourself. There's not big organisations or like formal things like in the city. You've got to go and make things happen. And so I think that's been a real driver for me, being quite independent. It wasn't until I was dating the ducks of the high school that the principal took some interest in how well I was performing at school, and he didn't want me to be a bad influence, so I actually lived with the school principal. And his wife, who was my 4-unit maths teacher, and their 3 kids, towards the end of my HSC up in Kempsey. Prior to that, my entrance to the workforce was, I learned how to drive a manual car when I was 10, and I had my own car when I was 13, and a motorbike. So I used to finish school in secondary school, get my motorbike and ride up the road several kilometres to a plant nursery, and I'd do a bunch of work there after school, just rearranging plants, and I got to learn a bit about the horticultural industry. I was also working at Macca's as a kitchen hand in high school, so between the two of them, I had a bit of pocket money to go and spend on cars. I had a collection of old Datsuns I used to work on. We'd rally them around vacant lots or around town, and I don't know how I didn't get into trouble more. The police made me walk my motorbike home on a couple of occasions. I didn't have a licence. But yeah, it was a bit of a rough and tumble kind of upbringing, I guess. We used to tow each other behind a big piece of cardboard in a car, like some of the big kikuyu grass plains that the dairy farms are on the mid-north coast. Big piece of cardboard skims across it beautifully. So we'd have 4 on the cardboard, 4 in the car, and anyway, we made it through. So I guess my initial approach to work, and this picture is my best friend at school, Jim Child. I caught up with him last year, and that's what this photo is. Because I think people could see I was a bit of a loose end. I had quite a few friends actually who were JWs. I wasn't religious. I grew up Catholic and then gave that up pretty quick. But my friend Jim, he really brought me into his family, and so that was sort of my probably strongest foundation of having exposure to a strong family unit, because it wasn't working very well on my Homewood front. So I was really grateful to him, and he never, he'd pull out the watchtower now and then, but never pushed anything onto me. And I'd go to the, what's the church called? The Kingdom Hall, yeah. I actually helped with one of the builds. Lovely group, just really good family structure, which has been enforced in some regards, if you want to deviate from some of their value systems. But anyway, if I wasn't dating the school ducks and get encouraged by the principal to, go into university study, because no one in my family had been to university before me, I'd probably be working with Jim up in Mid-North Coast as a diesel mechanic. That's the sort of thing I used to play around with on weekends. Because owning a bunch of old cars, you're always fixing them, and I could pull an engine out of one of my Datsuns and pull it apart, do a top-end rebuild, put it together in a weekend if I needed to. So I guess what I've done in the presentation is I'm going to go through what I've learned at school, through career, and what I was learning outside of work. So I also learned how to scuba dive up the Mid-North Coast. There's a beautiful cave up there, Fish Rock Cave. Just one of the world's best diving sites, full stop. 40-metre visibility, amazing variety of fish. And that was probably my first taste of adventure sports, was going through this cave where everything goes dark. I got lost once and ended up in this. You go in at 22 metres and you're meant to go up a tunnel for about 5. I ended up going down for several metres, ending up in this den with all these wobbegong sharks. Anyway, it was really exciting. I really liked it, and did a lot of surfing and things as well growing up the coast. So my girlfriend was going to university. I thought, well, I'm going to have to as well. I was quite enjoying maths and science, and I thought, well, I'll enrol in biomedical science down at Wollongong. My rationale was Wollongong wasn't too big of a city growing up in the bush, but there was no way I was going to go to Sydney because I just thought it was all, crime and pollution, and I don't know, I hadn't spent much time there. So I went into that degree thinking, how can you manipulate chemistry to have a health benefit, basically? And a lot of biomedical science, you either get into equipment or into pharmaceutical development. And halfway through that degree, sitting in yet another lecture of a biochemistry, organic biochemistry lecture, and you look at all of the systems that work in your body. Like I probably did about 6 different chemistry, biochemistry type subjects in that degree. And it's just amazing how well your body can repair itself. I actually went vegetarian at that point too. I was got into running and climbing and stuff. And when I could see how it all worked chemically and knew how to make it work for me, I felt great. And I thought, man, more people need to do this. And so I switched into exercise physiology. And that's what I graduated with after 4 years. And at that time at university, I learned how to ride a unicycle and juggle club. So I was in a youth circus in Wollongong while I was studying. I was also the president of the outdoor club at the University of Wollongong. And this next photo is me on a climb on the right in Victoria, pulling through a 5-metre roof, and that's on traditional gear. So the 2 types of climbing, you've got people who drill in holes and clip bolts, that's called sport climbing. Traditional is when you take metal wedges and you put them in cracks and hope that they hold in the event that you fall. And that's the style that I took to really quickly. I really like that traditional style. I also was a founding member of the World Peace Society, and on the left is me shaking hands with the then Mayor of Wollongong after running 2 marathons and speaking to 3,500 school students, just to encourage children to pursue their dreams. It was just, looking back, it could sound a bit trite, follow your dreams and, let's all band together. I think it was just after September 11 when I did this run. I got a lot of, and I was working then at Beaton Park Leisure Centre, like helping young athletes, and where else was I? I was at Shoalhaven Hospital, and I was working at Port Kembla Hospital. And yeah, like we got good media coverage out of it. And it was just a nice thing, I think. A lot of parents saw me at Beaton Park Leisure Centre, that's like a council-run leisure centre, and gave me good feedback saying it was a nice thing for their kids to be part of. And I guess to change the dynamic of that anniversary of September 11, to try and get a bit more hope that we can work together and make the world a better place. Oh, the platitudes. I do cringe about them now, but I think I was coming from a good place. So for 7 years, I worked as an exercise physiologist, and that's that's me just to the left of the guy in the red shirt. So that's me on the left, and my boss on my right, and Andy in the middle is from the Heart Foundation, and then the 2 girls in yellow are It's a clinical nurse consultant, clinical nurse specialist in cardiac rehabilitation. And that photo was taken at the first Auntie Jean's Good Health Team Korea Olympics that we held in Wollongong. So I was basically figuring out how to get people who are old and unwell to exercise safely. So I was working in a cardiac rehabilitation service. I was working in a chronic pain service where we saw compensable and non-compensable clients. I was working in an occupational rehabilitation centre that was in-house for health workers. So I was part of a team of 17, and we would have very good insight into all of the roles that people in our health district or then area health service were doing, and how to get them back to work quickly after an injury, how to navigate changes to work settings, and rotations and shifts and things. Actually, we started doing pre-employment task-based assessments. Myself and a senior physiotherapist put it together, and in the first year of operating, we reduced the insurance premium from $410,000 a year to 90. And that's just by, before people start a manually intensive role, such as in the linen service or hotel services, he is a senior physiotherapist, and me, well, I guess I was a senior physiologist. There weren't many, there was only two of us back then, and then there was just me. We didn't say no. We said, actually, I said no twice, come to think of it. There were two people out of about 800 assessments we did who we felt didn't have the functional ability to fulfil the role. But otherwise, we just guided them into the workplace and gave advice to the manager. And from that, injury rates plummeted. And when we did an assessment, it turned out to be my manual handling assessment that had the strongest correlation to reducing risk of injury down the track. I also worked quite closely with the cardiac rehab nurses and Heart Foundation and the Public Health Unit, and we redesigned the way that we provided cardiac rehab. So we have the best performing service in the state. 1 in 3 people who had open heart surgery would see us for any form of rehabilitation. That was the best in the state. 2/3 of people who had open heart surgery would go back to work or back to activities with no contact with a rehabilitation service, even though it was free. So we went on a journey of figuring out how we can engage with those 2/3 of people that say, no, I haven't got time, or no, I don't want to, or no, I can't make it to rehabilitation. And so I did, I don't think I've got a photo of it, no I don't. I got access to these lovely toys that analyse your gas when you breathe out. And so I did this expired air gas analysis, found Al's inflection point of when they switched to anaerobic metabolism, and I demonstrated these physiological outcomes from a telephone-based coaching service, which eventually became Get Healthy service. So we did the foundational research that indicated that that was evidence-based. In the meantime, I was working with Barb. Barb has a short hair, and Fiona on the right has long hair. I was working with Barb and Fiona, and I went, I think there's ways we can do things differently. And so we changed the way that we were delivering this care. We made our hours flexible. I did visits out into the disadvantaged communities. I basically had the dawning realisation that people who didn't come along, it wasn't because they didn't want to, it's because they weren't able to. They were disadvantaged, travel access or education access or whatever, or just anxiety around the whole process. So by the end of this research project, we lifted our rates to 49% engagement with some form of rehabilitation program. The state average was still 21%. And the other 50%, we showed that most of them will get engaged with a telephone-based model of care. Anyway, from all that, I went, this clinical stuff, I don't think it's the way to make difference to the health of people. And I thought, you don't need these big fancy things, you need to listen to people. So I went out west and actually, and I met my girlfriend at university, and we've been together for 7 years. And in this time, I took my unicycling to the next level. I did a lap of Tasmania on a unicycle. That's me on a 3-foot high wheel on the left. And on the right, I represented Australia at unicycle hockey at the World Championships in Japan in 2003. So that's what was going on outside of work. But I went out to the Riverina, followed my girlfriend out to Tumut, became a health development officer, and I did a lot of programs with schools, and actually I worked with Richard Colbrand, from who's now with Rural Doctors Network. He was then with the Australian Drug Foundation Good Sports program. So I was already working to get Tai Chi out to these rural communities as a falls prevention activity. And he brought me on board because I had really good engagement with these communities. And he said, we want to do a project where we change the culture of clubs away from getting pissed to connecting with people and doing something healthy. And I went, yeah, I'm your man, I can make this happen. And I said, but we're going to listen to them. We're going to go out, set up a structure, and we're going to do a community engagement process. We're going to find out what they're interested in doing from a community level, and work from that. We're not going to go in with solutions. So we set up all these committees and stuff. Ended up doing pedometer challenges. So I recruited hundreds of teams throughout the Riverina. I used all the funding to buy pedometers and put them in the local library network, and ran this fantastic event. Got some great talent on TV. I was on TV talking about it. And also the whole time I was in Wollongong, I was in Postmaster. The manager that I had in the last slide, in my first month on the job, she said, Joel, you know a lot, you can't explain it very well. And I went, oh shit, I better fix this. So I went to Toastmasters for 6 months, got better, but then I went back 6 months later, just because I really liked that platform to listen to people's stories and things. So after I was doing all this stuff really well with my community development role, public affairs manager of the then Greater NSW Health Service rang me up and said, Joel, I've seen you work with these media releases and your interviews. I want you to come and join our team and support other staff to get their stories out in media. I went, yeah, I'll give that a go. So, and again, in the meantime, while I was in Wollongong, I buddied up with a social worker on the left and was one of his actors in a feature-length movie about how to become a man from his perspective as a Mormon elder in Tumut. So that's us walking the red carpet together. So I helped him to write that movie and film. I did a little bit of directing, and I've also dabbled with ultramarathon running. So that's an article from the local paper on me getting ready for an ultramarathon run that was down the Snowy Mountains. So yeah, then I was working in public affairs, and I was thinking to myself, I wonder how do you get these good messages out into a community? Like, how do you share the good work that we're doing in health and all the advice that we've got for people to look after themselves better? And I realised that you need to build self-efficacy, which is seeing someone in a similar position achieve success. That's what builds their self-efficacy or their sense of hope. So we had then, so that's a photo of me with a very longly tied tie. I must have been feeling quite generous that day. And that's Patricia, who's the manager of Hillston MPS. And she used to give me heaps of good stories about these new nurses from Ireland that she'd get out there. And the gentleman next to her is the mayor of Hillston, or the then mayor. And that's who I'd leverage off. I'd go to the mayor and I'd be like, I've got this message I need to get to the community. Who's someone who can share that message, who's respected, connected with other people who can provide support? He'd link me up. It was us as a health service saying, you should be doing this. It didn't work. Especially me, some young fit guy that grew up the coast. I mean, me going into these communities didn't mean anything. So that was my approach. I'd go into these communities and I'd figure out who the players were. Like in Junee was the retired railway guys. They pull the strings in that town. Once I got them on board, that's when you can get things happening in the town, get the right messages out. But at the same time, you still got to deal with all of the bureaucracy and the politics. And that's where I realised working in public affairs, politics makes things really messy. Because I was not only doing proactive media work, I was doing a lot of reactive work. So we had Darryl Maguire then, was the local member. Liberal member in a Labor government, and he hammered us. So we were constantly under the pump, justifying why we'd done the most minute things. There must have been people that were leaking things from the health service about what was going on. And then when Joe McGurr ran as an independent, he leaked all this stuff about what was going on at Wagga Base Hospital, so we're on the back foot with that. So I learned a lot about how politics works in that role. I can't remember what this next slide was. Oh, that's right, Toastmasters. So while I was doing that at work, I set up a Toastmasters club in Tumut. And after I set that up, I helped put one together in Jerilderie. Oh, it didn't help. They were already doing it. I gave them inspiration to get over the line and get that club formed. And then we set one up in Griffith. So because I'd spent a lot of time in Toastmasters in Wollongong, living in Tumut, there wasn't a lot that sort of engaged with me socially. So I set this club up and got some great buy-in, mostly from old retired women. I was coaching an 84-year-old grandmother for quite a few years, and the stories I heard from her, she was classic. And what I loved about that was just the stories. Like, I'd go in every Monday night and I'd think, I'm going to learn something new about the experience of people I would otherwise have no contact with, and I loved it. And I got quite involved in the administration of Toastmasters. The first person who expressed interest in joining the club I was forming in Tumut, I coached her to become the area, what are they called, an area manager? Area governor, that's right. So she managed 6 clubs. Wendy's nodding her head here. She managed 6 clubs, and there were 260 people, her equivalent across our district, which was Canberra, New South Wales. And in her second year, while I was mentoring her, she was voted the #1 area governor in that district out of 260. So I really took pride in that. Not just that I got this club over the line, but I coached someone, like mentored her to be like the best leader of that level in the whole state. And in Toastmasters, I changed my focus from figuring out how to talk to people to how to listen to people. And that coincided with all of the health reforms in 2011, 2012. So we became Murrumbidgee Local Health District, and they said, Joel, we want you to be our community engagement manager. You're doing all this good work, figuring out who these people are to connect within the communities. Your job is to reduce the work of the public affairs manager, with things going to media, and the ministerials manager, from people writing nasty letters to their local member. We want to use your connection with the people in the community to get them involved in shared decision making and getting the message out. So that's me with the governing board chair, Linda Summers, in the middle, and the then CEO, Susan, on the far side, Susan Weiser. And my role was to work closely with them to figure out what in the organisation we can put on the table to get involvement from the community about what we can change, how to make it more patient-centred. There was all this rhetoric coming out, local decision-making, patient-centred care, but actually getting traction on the road took me a lot of work. I had to dive into the organisation and start at the director level and say, set a lesson, loosen up. I'd say, you need to give me things that you're going to put on the table that we're going to change based on community input. What are they? And then listen, I'd say, we're going to go and talk to the community and say, what is the best way for us to listen to you and your concerns? And then the last step, let them know. We are then going to feed back to them how we have used their feedback to make change for the better. So that's what I learned in that role. But I realised there wasn't a lot of capacity for it. So an opportunity came up for me to become a telehealth manager. So I was putting video conferencing units, and I thought this is a good chance to take all this engagement approach and apply it to staff to build capacity so that they understand how good it is to then apply to the broader community. Here's some photos of me in the meantime. I took up mountain biking. I used to go and play on the lake, Blowering Lake, up at Blowering Reservoir up the back of Tumut. And has anyone else tried an aqua skipper? You pump it up and down. You've got a 7-foot fin. You'd go at 30 k's an hour, faster than any other human-powered form of locomotion on water. So I became a telehealth manager and I won an award for how well we put together some videos on recruiting staff for the Wagga-based hospital redevelopment, because we needed another 50 nurses to go into the mental health ward that was being built at Wagga-based Hospital. So I was working in telehealth and I was doing the engagement bit about how we can make the model of care work with that virtual link. And that was a big body of work in itself. I worked closely with the clinical nurse consultant in critical care. I linked in with neonatal emergency transfer service, with burns unit at Concord, all these other tertiary services, and I had to cut through a lot of relationship building neglect between Wagga-based, Griffith, and then these smaller sites. Sorry, I'm going to go over time here just by a few minutes. Sorry. So what I did is I applied that whole engagement process to new nurses that were working in Wagga, and I said, we're going to make some short videos. You're going to write them and direct them. And within 2 hours, I sat down with that guy in the middle, Rui. That's me, Rui, and Charlene getting an award at the Nurses Association for these videos that I put together after a 2-hour facilitation session. So I just sort of used that as a way to say, look, guys, if you do it right, if you listen to them the right way, you put stuff on the table, empower people, you get the best product. Anyway, by this stage, I'd had it with living in Tumut. I reluctantly said farewell to my partner, ended a 14-year relationship, moved to Sydney, said goodbye to the snowfields and holidays that I'd been having while I was living down that end of the woods. And I went back to my clinical roots and I got employed as a community exercise physiologist with mental health. Actually, I did a bit of business. I was a business analyst in between, and I think that's why they took me on, because they could see there was a lot of forging that needed to be done to improve the physical well-being of mental health consumers. So this is me in the pink shirt, Erica in the black skirt. So she's a dietitian, I'm the exercise physiologist, and the rest are peer workers. They are people who have severe or persistent mental illness, and we employed them as peer workers and included them in our model of care. That was some of the most rewarding clinical work I've ever done. That gentleman at the back, Shay, I'm a very close friend of his. We go paddling together. The guy down the front, that's got the cheesy grin. Will actually started as a consumer that I was treating. Very common when you take a antipsychotic medication, you put on weight really quickly. You get this genu varum. It's like a condition where your knees splay out to accommodate changes in morphology. You get patella tracking issues, gives you pain. And it's something you can fix it reasonably well. I cured him in a month from this patella tracking issue. He got back to basketball, connected with his friends, and his recovery from there just went through the roof. So he come on board as a peer support worker. And I said, I'm not going to treat him anymore. You're a colleague. And by the time I left, we were very close friends. I still catch up with him and his family regularly for dinner. And the guy on the left, Ben's now managing an implementation of a suicide prevention. He's HSM3 at a Liverpool hospital. Amazing people. What I learned from that is, like, compassion, if you could bottle it, is priceless. And these peer support workers brought compassion in spades. Me and the dietitian wouldn't have gotten anything done in community mental health with the consumers if it wasn't for them. And so what I learned from that, like how to engage with socially disadvantaged groups, find the joy. That's the Marie Kondo reference. And the other element is, don't tell someone they need to lose weight. The more that you externalise or build an external validation to success, the more they rebel against it, and it's not patient-centred. So in all of my coaching that I've done, and I've coached thousands of patients who are usually referred to me for weight loss, but there's often a lot of other things going on. The biggest thing I've learned clinically to ask people is how things make them feel. And now all the evidence is coming out about linking in to that, the impact that treatment has on someone's affect. So the emotional impact that you have, like from physical activity. How'd you feel when you went out for a walk? Oh, I felt good, you know, I got to see the neighbourhood, saw some people. Like, you want people to connect with those emotions. Me putting one a set of scales every month doesn't help to do that. So I stopped weighing people, which the district didn't like, because that was their schema. We're there to make all of these fat mental health patients thin again. And in reality, no one who's put on weight is going to lose weight in our community and maintain it unless you've had surgery, gastric surgery. So I did my bit to push all of that message, and then I bailed out. When I moved to Sydney, I got back into the canyoning scene. So that girl on the left, Jen, if you get lost in the Blue Mountains bushwalking or canyoning or rock climbing, she's the rescue paramedic that's going to be first on the scene and figure out if she needs to get the helicopter in or not. So me and her, and that guy next to her, Ben, is from the military. He does a lot of rescue operations. We started to explore more progressive canyons. The one on the right is one called Clostrel. I don't know if people have heard of that one. And so I became a business manager then. I'll wrap this up real quickly now. I had to support a team of 60 people. That was what I was doing before I joined the ministry. That's Norman Swan. In the picture, I was really trying to figure out how to really make culture change work, and you know, I was doing a lot of business plans and things that didn't work. And I just went, well, you know what, sometimes old habits die hard, and I gave up on it. Moved to the ministry. In the meantime, I was doing more progressive canyons in New Zealand that have fire. So picture on the left is typical Blue Mountains, a little bit of a trickle. Right on the right, New Zealand, a torrent of glacial runoff water that's very easy to drown in at the bottom. And so that's what I was getting into when I was in Sydney. And I worked in workforce planning, joined Brian's team, because I wanted to know how to make system-wide change. And I learned a lot about how relationships are really important working at this level. That's me on a visit back out to Griffith Hospital with the Director of Operations and the Director of Medical Services when we were doing the rural health piece. And in the meantime, I learned how to do mountaineering. This is me on Mount Brewster in the South Island, New Zealand. I think there's just a delay coming up on this monitor. Yeah, so I've doubled a bit in mountaineering now. And brings me to today. I've got the absolute pleasure of working with Charles and Wendy and Alira in our Aboriginal workforce. And for me, I think it's, again, this sense of curiosity. I'm thinking, how do you make this culture change work? And they've certainly got we certainly have our work cut out for us, the whole system, and how to accommodate diverse cultural needs and desires. And what I'm really learning from working with Charles is the importance of role modelling your values. I'm constantly amazed with how much passion and heart Charles brings to the role. So I'm very, very happy to be working in the ministry. And outside of work, this is my happy place now. I actually converted a van into a camper. And this is my mate Dave, who must be one of the most adventurous people in Australia. He's very progressive with climbing, canyoning, caving, paragliding, whitewater kayaking, the works. And these are the sort of adventures that we get up to. So I'm getting back into ice climbing now, and probably do some more exploratory caving work. So yeah, that's my work story. Sorry I went over time a little bit, but
thanks,
me,
Joel. Yeah,
for me it's been a really good story of curiosity. You know, I've learned a lot from working in the health service, moving around, and yeah, I've learned a lot along the way. And if there's anything that someone would like to explore more, because within all these roles, there's a lot of different projects that you take on. I'm happy to have a chat about any of it.
thanks, Joel. A very organic career journey, I think, in both regards. The real organic, touching the earth, stuff you're doing, but also the different twists and turns you've taken with opportunities. Quite a journey. What I really like listening about, Joel, is how you have reflected on the learnings and the people around you, and making those connections, and looking at how you can continue to contribute in creative ways. It's a great story.
And I'm only halfway there.
You're not even halfway there, Joel.
I know. I'm 43. I've been in the workforce for 23 years. I've need to last another 23 yet.
At least. But thanks for that. I think we're up to the point in the